All right, today you get access to day 2 of the 4-day ornament build event. Now, if you missed out on day 1, make sure you go check that out. I will link that somewhere up here on the video so you can check it out there. And then for day 2, today's video, it's going to be led by Connor, who is an active 7-figure Etsy POD seller. He just surpassed $2 million on the platform and is about to have an incredible Q4 season. So he has so much to share when it comes to properly structuring and building out your photo templates for this product type on Etsy. He'll be walking through the tools, the resources, and the strategies to make this all come to life. So let's jump straight into day 2, where Connor walks you through a proper photo template build for the product type of ornaments.
So let's get into today's training. In day 1, Jesse talked about the ornament opportunity on Etsy. He showed this fancy graph here, which shows the potential for huge increased demand and huge increases in conversion rates during the Christmas season. But Jesse has done $10 million in print product sales, and he's one of the top Etsy sellers ever. The average Etsy seller experiences something more like this. And so I've overlaid a red line here, the solid red line towards the bottom. That's meant to represent what the average Etsy seller would likely experience. Jesse, being one of the top Etsy sellers ever, experienced far greater results. But the average seller likely will experience something far less. But if you're here, I would guess you don't want to be average. You're not here for fun. You're here to make money, right? That's what we all want as business owners. So, how can we be better than average and experience results closer to what Jesse showed? In my opinion, listing photos are your single greatest opportunity to do just that. If you've done any ornament research, you've noticed most of the designs actually look very similar. For example, these 3 family of 3 Christmas ornaments, the designs actually look very similar. But only one of these listings dominates the sales. And if you guys have done any research, you may be able to spot which ornament that is, or you may understand why. We'll get into that a little bit later in this video. The key difference isn't the specific watercolor trees that are used. Each of these features a slightly different watercolor tree. It's not even the cute little red bow on that middle ornament. The key difference is the quality of the listing photos. And so that listing on the right absolutely dominates over all the other ornaments in this specific micro market for Christmas ornaments. And again, the key difference is the quality of the listing photos. Because the seller who gets the click often wins, even with the same design or a worse design. So, listing photos are the main reason why Lauren and I have done $2 million plus in sales on Etsy with no design background. So, our primary goal with listing photos is to get the click. Then we optimize for conversion rate. So, what this looks like, on the left side we have our thumbnail. The intention there is to get the click. All of our secondary photos, which are represented by those blue boxes there, those help to convert to a sale. And because you can't get a sale if you never get a click, majority of the time and effort should be spent on the thumbnail. Seems pretty straightforward, but I think a lot of people miss this, which is why I'm emphasizing it. Now, if you guys attended the 40-ounce tumbler challenge over the summer, you saw me demonstrate a full listing photo build for those 40-ounce tumblers. However, many of you just copied exactly what I showed in that training, which was not my intention at all. So, today's training will be focused more on theory and less on demonstration, because I want you to begin to develop the skills. And I promise it will serve you and your business far greater than just copying exactly what I do. So, to make sure we're on the same page, let's start with a basic definition. So listing photo templates are the set of images designed by you to communicate your product and offer to your potential customer. We typically spend weeks on our listing photo templates. I'm not exaggerating here. When I look back to 2023, when we first launched Ornaments through Inner Circle Prints, Lauren and I literally spent 3 weeks building our listing photo templates. And that probably seems extreme to you. You may be like, I only spend a couple hours on my listing photo templates, or I spend 30 minutes each time I create a listing. And so you can see a drastic difference in how much time we typically spend compared to the average seller. And I would just encourage you guys, you likely need to spend more time on your listing photos. You're likely not spending enough time and putting enough emphasis on them. And in my opinion, it's the single greatest opportunity for you to stand out and for you to win on Etsy. So like I mentioned, we spent literally 3 weeks on those listing photos that September of that year, 2023. And then fast forward to November and December that year, we ran our first back-to-back 100K months selling ornaments. So it paid off. I promise spending more time on your listing photos is going to serve you, and it's worth your time. So some more key terms just to make sure we're on the same page. So whenever I say mock-up images, I'm talking about the product images or photos of the product used to create your templates. And these can be typically found on Etsy from various mock-up shops. When I say thumbnail, I'm talking about the first photo or the image the customer sees in search before they click on your listing. And when I say badge, I'm talking about an overlaid text element that is meant to increase the click-through rate by catching the eye of the customer while emphasizing a key value point. So, high level, our research process for photo templates. Number one, we start by reviewing the listing photos of shops on your list. That same list of shops that Jesse talked about in yesterday's training, the homework he gave you to find those shops, you're now going to use those shops and review their listing photos. And while doing that, you're going to start to identify style and aesthetic. Then you're going to read through hundreds of customer reviews, like actually read through all the reviews. It's tedious, but I promise you'll pull out very important information. You're going to start to identify feedback, things like slow shipping, blurry prints, loved that it came with a gift box, etc. You're also going to identify customer language, things like this ornament is super cute. You're going to start to learn your customer better than anyone else. And then finally, you're going to document that research. Now, the way that we typically document this research is we like to take some detailed notes. And I've broken this into 5 or 6 sections here. The top section on the left is our listing photo slides. That section is meant to outline what's going to be on each page of your listing photo templates. That usually is filled out last. The other sections you can fill out as you do your research. So for example, the style and theme points, you can start to jot down some notes as you review those listing photos from the shops on your list. Same thing with customer language and customer feedback. As you guys review those hundreds of reviews, start to make notes here. Things that stand out, areas that you could emphasize in your listing photos to increase conversion rate and have your listing stand out from others. And then down at the bottom, we like to include some details on brand colors and fonts just to get really clear on our branding before we go in and start to draft our listing photos. And then finally, on the right side, I usually like to include a few inspiration images. That kind of goes hand in hand with the style and theme points and really just gives a visual for when you do start to go look for mockups and start to build those listing photo templates. So this is kind of the format that we use. It doesn't need to be anything formal. You guys can take a screenshot of this and build your own. Like I said, it doesn't need to be in a special format. It's really just notes for yourself and a framework that's helped us to create high quality listing photos. So try this out if you guys haven't tried this before. So what makes good photo templates? It's a little subjective, but in my opinion, good photo templates are styled for the customer. They effectively communicate, inform, educate, and excite the customer. They have that cohesive branding and theme. They use language and word choice that aligns with the customer. And you can only do that if you've identified who that customer is through reading those hundreds of reviews. Your thumbnail image is optimized for cropping on Etsy. And the product takes up a large percentage of the thumbnail. In other words, it's easy to see. I see a lot of sellers miss this last point, especially in ornaments where their product isn't zoomed in enough, which makes their design very small and just doesn't stand out in search. So, a little more detail on listing photo badges because it's super important. And I think it's another opportunity for you to really stand out and increase that click-through rate. So as a reminder, a badge is an overlaid element or text box on your thumbnail image that is meant to increase click-through rate, or CTR. In my opinion, a good badge is eye-catching. It stands out from the sea of listings, or in other words, helps your listing stand out from the sea of listings in search. It emphasizes a top value point. I think that's another key element and a thing that a lot of sellers currently miss. Right? They add a badge and it's not necessarily a value point that the customer cares about, right? And so it doesn't increase that click-through rate naturally. Same thing with the easily readable. We talked about this on the previous slide about sometimes your product is too small in that small thumbnail and therefore not readable, not viewable. Same thing with the badge. Your badge wants to be quickly readable, easily readable, big, bold font so that it helps increase that click-through rate, right? The next thing I wanted to talk about was thumbnail cropping. So if you guys go to the Etsy Seller Handbook, you'll find this article. I just took a snippet of it for the sake of this training. But Etsy still recommends starting from a 4x3 rectangle, a horizontal rectangle, again, in the aspect ratio of a 4x3. And they say, make sure that your thumbnail images have enough of a border that they can be cropped to a square thumbnail without losing some of the product. And so my recommendation when starting with ornaments is to start from a 4x3, not starting from a square. I think that really puts your listing in a position where it's hard to optimize for the cropping if you start from a square. So start from a 4x3. I like to start from a 2,667 pixel by 2,000 pixel canvas, and that's what I use for my listing photos for Christmas ornaments. Now, Etsy often tests things leading up to Q4. So for example, they are currently testing a new crop in the vertical orientation. You guys may have seen this as you've been doing some of your research. And so what's happening is it's cutting off some of people's badges, some of the edges of their ornaments, and it's really annoying, right? But don't panic. This is likely just a test until Etsy comes out with a formal announcement saying this is the new direction. I would continue to proceed with their formal recommendation of starting in a 4x3 and optimizing for a square cropping. With that said, we can be a little proactive and get ready for that announcement if that formal announcement does come and if this vertical orientation is here to stay. So I'll show you guys how to do that in the tutorial right now. All right, guys, now we're going to talk about thumbnail cropping in a little more detail. And so as a reminder, Etsy still recommends starting in a 4x3 ratio. And so I've set up this Canva canvas in a 2,667 by 2,000 pixel ratio. And that's essentially a 4x3 horizontal rectangle. And so, as I said earlier, Etsy recommends that we make sure that our thumbnail images, just the thumbnail image, has enough of a border that it can be cropped into a square thumbnail without losing some of the product. And so I'm going to show you what I mean on this next page here. And so, for example, these listing photos, you can see the badges specifically are completely cut off. And so as we talked about, you want your badges to be optimized because the intention is that they help with click-through rate. They help get that click, which we talked a lot about, right? How important it is to get that click so that you can win on Etsy. And so these listings, for example, are definitely not optimized for that square cropping on Etsy. So for example, these 3 badges here are all cut off. You maybe can understand what they're meant to say, but they really don't serve the purpose. And so if we're strategic up front, we can optimize our listings so that those badges are optimized and are visible and jump off the page. Same thing with our ornament product, right? These actually have done a pretty good job. This one specifically fits in that square very nicely. This one, maybe the ornament's a little smaller than I would like. Probably could zoom in more on this ornament so that it just shows bigger and bolder in that search. And so I'm going to show you guys exactly how we do that now. And so I have just a standard thumbnail example here with a hanging ornament, and then I have a sample badge here just for the sake of this example. And what I like to do, like I said, we're starting from this 2667 by 2000 pixel canvas, and we've just overlaid our listing photo. And so I've actually zoomed way in on this ornament, right? Because I want it to take up a large portion of the page here. And so what I'm going to do to check the square cropping is I'm just going to add a square. And to do that, I just hit the R key, which will add a rectangle. And I can make this rectangle a 2000 by 2000 pixel. And that will fill the page there. And then we can just center it on the page. So it's centered and in the middle. And what I like to do is just add some transparency here so I can see kind of how my product, my ornament in this case, is positioned, as well as my badge. And so what I'm looking for is that the ornament fills up the page nicely, right? It takes up a large percentage of the page, which it does in this case, but that it's not cut off. Same thing with the badge. The badge will still be big and bold when it's cropped in this way, and it's still readable. None of it's cut off, right? And so, for example, I see a lot of people, like I talked about earlier, where their ornaments are more like this, which results in a very small ornament when seen in search. We've also seen the example in some of those ones that I gave where the ornament is more like this. And so it's going to be completely cutting off your design. It's harder to distinguish what type of product it is. And so it's super, super important that you guys spend the time up front to optimize the sizing and position of not only your main listing photo, your product, and your badge. So this is essentially how I do it, starting from the 4:3 ratio and optimizing for that most extreme cropping, which Etsy states formally is that square. Now, as we talked about earlier, Etsy's been testing an alternative cropping, one that's in a vertical orientation, right? A tall, skinny rectangle, maybe more similar to Pinterest or what you see on other platforms like Instagram, things like that. And so, in my opinion, this is still just a test. I haven't seen any formal announcement from Etsy that this is the direction they're going. They often test things like this leading up to Q4, but I think we can be a little proactive heading into that season, right? If Etsy does make the decision, hey, this is what we're going to do going forward, the updated recommendation is that your listing should be optimized for that vertical cropping. So to do that, essentially what you guys want to do is do a very similar approach, right? So instead of a square, I'm going to copy this. I'll go to the next page here. Instead of a square, it's actually a 1700 by 2000. That's about the size from what I've measured of that vertical orientation. And what that means is when we center this on the page here, is that our ornament starts to get cut off slightly, meaning it's harder to distinguish what the product is. It may cut off some of your design if it's a little more extreme than this case. And definitely our badge is cut off, which isn't great, right? We don't want our main value point, the thing we're trying to highlight to get that increased click-through rate, to be cut off. So what we're going to do here is we're going to optimize in a similar way for that vertical orientation. So what that would mean in this case is just shrinking down that image a little bit so that our ornament product fits nicely, but still takes up a large portion. And then we would do the same thing with the badge, right? So for in this case, maybe I make the badge a little bit smaller and I'll bring this in something like that. I won't spend too much time on this part because we are just talking about cropping for the sake of this video. So something like this, I think would look pretty good. Now it's not only optimized for the 4:3 ratio, right? It looks good in this orientation, in this cropping. The ornament's still fairly large, but it also is optimized for that vertical orientation cropping. And when you guys spend the time to set up your listing photos in this way, you never have to touch that setting in Etsy, which you guys may be familiar with. When you're in the back end of your listing and you upload your listing photos, Etsy has a setting where you can do some cropping or zoom in and out. In my experience, that feature does not work well at all. I never touch that button. It really screws things up from what I've seen. So I like to spend all my time up front optimizing for the potential crops on Etsy on my listing photo, so I don't have to do any zooming when I get to Etsy. It's already zoomed and optimized exactly how I want it. So hopefully this helps you guys start to optimize your listing photos for the various crops, and also start to think ahead a little bit about being proactive. Maybe if Etsy does go formally in that direction of the vertical cropping, you guys could spend the time up front, just have an alternate listing photo that you do optimize for this vertical cropping, and just save that in your files. And if you do need it, you'll have it ready to use when Etsy gives that formal direction.
All right, guys, real quick, if you're getting a lot of value out of this training and you really want to take your business to the next level, I have something super special for you. So there is a link in the description below where you can apply to work one-on-one with our active 7-figure Etsy print-on-demand coaches. Right now is the absolute best time frame of the entire year to invest in your business and to double down on growth. And the reason for this is due to the massive rise in search volume and the massive rise in conversion rate during the months of October, November, and December. So when you take the leap right now and you begin working hand in hand with an active 7-figure Etsy print-on-demand coach, your results can absolutely explode during the Q4 season. You can maximize the revenue and profit you are generating in your business and come into 2026 much better positioned at 3, 4, 5 times the level you're sitting at today. So I can't implore you enough. If you're going to take the leap at some point in time over the next few months, this is the time frame to do it. During the season where conversion is at a 2.5x level, where search volume is at a 15 to 20x level, when things are popping off the charts, this is the time to double down and make it happen. So if you are ready to take your business to the next level, like I said before, I can't encourage you enough. This is the time frame to do it. It's the easiest time frame out of the entire year. The link is in the description below. You can apply there and you'll get a overview video sent to you if you are approved for our coaching program. And the last thing I want to share with you is that registration will officially close on October 1st, and anyone who applies after October 1st will be moved on to a wait list for when registration reopens at some point inside of 2026.
So the next thing I wanted to talk about was secondary listing photos. So after we get our click, our next goal is to optimize for conversion rate. We do this with optimized secondary listing photos. So again, what makes good secondary photos? In my opinion, again, they're styled for the customer. They effectively communicate, inform, educate, excite the customer. They have cohesive branding and theme, which I want to spend a little bit more time on today. And then they also use language and word choice that aligns with the customer. So, some best practices for cohesive branding. Number one, I strongly encourage you guys to use consistent fonts throughout. And if you go through that exercise that I showed earlier, detailing those notes as you do that photo template research, that'll be really helpful in nailing this cohesive branding. So really encourage consistent fonts, 2 fonts, sometimes 3 max, using consistent brand colors throughout all the listing photos, keeping that consistent style and theme, and having professional looking images. And one way to achieve this is by using mock-ups from the same mock-up shop, right? So if you go get all your mock-ups from the same mock-up shop, it can really help naturally create that cohesive feel and style, right? Because you'll have similar lighting, similar backgrounds. They look like they all go together. It really creates that professional looking set of images, right? And it's not just about images, it's about the text and the things that you're highlighting throughout your listing photos. Those things need to look professional too. So the alignment of text, spacing of text, sizing of fonts, make sure that's all consistent. That's all done very well and just looks professional, right? They seem like minor details, but the customer subconsciously picks up on those things. And the better your listing photos are, the higher your conversion rate's going to be in our experience. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was Photoshop versus Canva. Should you guys be building your photo templates in Photoshop, or should you just do it in Canva? In my opinion, Photoshop is not necessary for ornament listing photos. We've sold over $500,000 worth of ornaments using Canva listing photos specifically, never using Photoshop. We use Photoshop for other product categories like tumblers, where they have a 360-degree wrap and it just looks more realistic using that smart object layer in Photoshop, but absolutely not necessary for ornaments in my opinion. And one of the main reasons is with hundreds of daily orders, which often require proofs to the customer. For example, ornaments where the customer wants a photo printed on the ornament, we often send mock-ups or proof to the customer. And just having those photo templates built in Canva allows us to send those proofs and create those proofs so much quicker. And it just has been much more efficient for us. So that's why we prefer to use Canva. We do all our designing in Canva, and it's super convenient to just have all the listing photo templates right there in Canva as well. So we can quickly create those or the proofs as well. So today I'm going to show you guys a trick to improve your Canva mockup quality and achieve a similar effect to what Photoshop can give you, but through Canva, to increase that efficiency and just streamline the process for you. So we're going to jump to the second part of the tutorial now. All right, guys, now I'm going to show you how you can overlay your designs that you create onto your listing photo templates. And I'm going to show you guys a trick with Canva frames and how we do it. So basically I have a couple designs prepped here. So we have our example listing photo template here. And so let me just bring our badge back into the picture. And so I'm just going to overlay this, our first Christmas as grandparents ornament design onto our ornament. And so you guys may do something similar to this for ornaments or other products that you work on. You'll just insert the design and kind of just overlay it, position it how you think is correct, size it how you need to. And then you may lower the transparency a little, something like 80% in this case, maybe gives it a little more realistic look, how it would look on the actual ornament. And so this works great for designs like this, but it doesn't work great for designs like this, where you have a full coverage of the ornament, maybe it's a full photo or just a solid colored background. And so it doesn't really work that great, right? We can try and resize it to be about the size of the circle, but what ends up happening is it doesn't fit perfectly. It really looks flat on the page. What do we do about this ribbon? The whole just doesn't look good overall, right? And so what I like to do instead is create Canva frames. And so one way you could do that is just to create a frame here. So you could say a frame, and we could add a circle. Kind of the same thing. We'll lower the transparency a little bit just so we can see. And then in this case, ornaments are pretty much perfectly circle. So you could do something like this and use a frame. But in my experience, it never lines up perfectly when you do it like this, right? Like you can see it's like slightly off and just isn't going to look great when you do it like this. And so the workaround that I like to use is I like to create a custom frame, right? And so I'm going to show you guys exactly how I do that. And so step one is you're going to download an image of just the mockup. So I'm going to move this to the back, and I'm just going to download this page here. So I'll download it as a PNG. And then once that downloads, I'm going to jump over into PowerPoint. And so I've actually already inserted this image just for the sake of this training to make things go quicker. But so I'll insert that image that I downloaded just on a blank PowerPoint page. And I use Microsoft PowerPoint. This is one way that I found that this works. You can definitely use Photoshop if you guys are tech savvy in Photoshop and know how to use that. But this is how I do it. This is the workaround I use to create those high quality, realistic looking ornament mock-ups. So to start, I'm just going to insert a shape. And the cool thing about this circle in PowerPoint is you can change it all around, right? You can make it fit perfectly. And so I'm just going to add some formatting here. I'm going to increase the transparency so again we can see. And I'm going to get rid of the outside line. And now what I'm going to do is just try and line this up perfectly on our ornament product, so that it perfectly traces the edges. So something like that looks pretty good. And normally I'll zoom in, like really inspect, but I think for the sake of this training, this looks pretty good. And now from here, what we need to do is we want to deal with the ribbon and the hole, right? So to do that, what I'm going to do, and maybe I'll fix this slightly, something like that. So what we do is we insert another shape here. And so if we go to shapes and we use this freeform shape, we're going to zoom way in on our ornament here. And we're just going to use this freeform shape to trace the part of the product image that we want to cut out. In this case, it's going to be the ribbon. So I'm just going to start to trace this ribbon as best as I can. And you want to go really slow here, because the closer you are to the exact tracing, the better it's going to look. So sometimes it takes a couple tries at this to get it right. But for the sake of this training, we'll try and do it all in one shot here. So it'd be something like this. And then we'll trace around the other side of the ribbon here. Just like that. And then the next step here, it's really important, the order in which you click things. So we're going to select our original circle that we selected, and then we're going to hit the Control or the Command key if you're on a Mac, and select the second object. Now we're going to use this tool right here, which is called Merge Shapes. And if we hit Subtract, it's basically going to cut out the second shape. So what we're left with is a frame, or a circle still. Not a frame yet, but a circle that cuts out that ribbon. And now the next step is we need to insert an image. The only way that this works is if you guys insert an image. So you're going to go to Picture or Text Fill, and we're just going to insert a stock image here. We'll use this cow for now. So this works pretty good. As you can see, the ribbon is overlaid. The hole goes right through the image. And that's exactly what we want. And so from here, what we're going to do is we're going to download this file. We would just go to File, Save As, and download it or save it as a PDF file. It's super important that you save it as a PDF. It won't work if it's just a PowerPoint file or a PNG or a JPEG. It needs to be a PDF file. So once we've done that, we're going to jump back to our Canva file here. And I've already done this for the sake of this tutorial, but you've downloaded that PDF. Now, if you come into Canva and you were to upload that PDF as a new file, just go to Canva, say Upload New Design, and upload that PDF that you saved. What ends up happening is you get a page that looks like this. And because we inserted that shape and inserted the image in that shape, essentially what happens, and in this case I have a baseball player as the photo that I uploaded, but normally it would have shown that cow, right? Because that's what you used. But essentially it creates a smart object layer for you. So it has that ornament ribbon cut out and the hole. And you can just delete that image that was in there as the placeholder. And now we can take this frame and we can bring this frame back into our ornament mock-ups. And so now we just need to resize it. It's perfectly tracing the circle. If we spent time to make that perfect, something like that looks about right. I'll lower this just so we can see. And now what we can do when we insert our full photo ornament or full colored background, it looks a lot more realistic, right? And this makes it super simple to just drag in your designs each time, right? So if you take the time to set up these frames on each one of your listing photos, as you're creating those final listing photos to upload to your Etsy listing, you can just drag these in one by one and create these very high quality looking listing photos within Canva, right? To improve that efficiency. And just like I said, we prefer to use Canva whenever we can. So the one thing I want to highlight here is the ornament actually looks still a little bit flat, right? When we have that full coverage, it kind of just looks like a flat piece of paper. We want to add that dimension and add kind of the rounded edges, the glossiness, the highlights. And so to do that, what I like to do is just add in like these brush strokes. So if you look up just like a curved brush stroke, and there's a bunch of different options here. Maybe something like this works pretty good. And what I like to do is just make it white. And what I'm going to do is you kind of want to just trace, you want to size it so that it traces the outer edge. Something like that. And then we're really going to lower the transparency so that it's very faint. Something like that, maybe a little more. Maybe 30, something like that. And then what we're going to do is add another one over here. It looks a little silly when you're zoomed in, but I promise when you're zoomed out and just looking with an untrained eye, this looks much more realistic and you can get away with it, right? To allow you to still work in Canva, right? And so you can already see it's added a little bit of depth and dimension to the ornament. And maybe we'll add another one right here. You can use different ones of these too, guys. You don't have, you can like kind of mix and match. Maybe a smaller one that we can find. We'll keep looking here. I know I have one down here because I spent a little time ahead of time just prepping for this. So for the sake of time, I'm going to add this other one. It's a little thinner, as you can see, than those other ones. So just to add a little variation, I'm going to do something similar. Try and trace that arc, have it pretty close to the edge here, and I'll do the same thing down in this corner. So this is by no means professional highlighting or shadowing. I'm untrained, as I said, not a professional graphic designer, but this has worked for us, right? It's allowed us to streamline our process and still get those high quality listing photos. And I hope that you guys can too. So what you're left with is that high quality frame on your listing photos. We'll bring our badge back into play here. Bring that to the front, something like that. And this is just going to allow you guys to quickly insert your designs one by one, especially those full photo background mock-ups, especially the ones with the full coverage. Like if you had a full colored background, you could do the same thing. The ribbon shows through, the whole looks realistic. And so, yeah, if you guys want to spend the extra time up front, I think it will save you a lot of time and really improve that high quality look of your listing photos. And it's a way for you guys to do this without necessarily relying on Photoshop or having to go to a different program like Photopea or things like that. So it can all be done in Canva. You guys can follow along, rewind this if you need to, rewatch this part of the training when you go to create your own frames for your listing photos. But I would highly recommend it. It's worked really well for us. And like I said earlier, it's a quick way, not only just for your listing photos, but if you guys do photo ornaments, I would strongly encourage that you send proofs. And being able to have these set up, like you could have an alternative one that says like custom mock-up, right, for your customer. And so when you send that proof, you could send them this image, right? And you could just be in Canva, you'd create your design, go to your mock-up file right here, and again, just insert the design. Quick and easy, download it, send it to your customer for approval. So hopefully this was helpful for you guys. It's been a huge reason why we've been able to handle hundreds and hundreds of orders during that peak Christmas season, just streamlining this process, especially the mock-up process. So yeah, hopefully this was helpful for you guys. All right, I wanted to give you guys an ornament pro tip. So for most products, we try to create one set of listing photos, which we use for 95% of our listings in that product category. However, for ornaments, you may consider multiple sets of listing photo templates. For example, you may have a Christmas theme set, which has Christmas elements like those pine cones. You may have a more minimalist set with more neutral, lighter colored backgrounds, more minimalist themed, evergreen themed greenery. And then also you may have more of an evergreen event themed style set of listing photos with candles, which more align with anniversaries, baptisms, things like that. And so in our experience, it's been really beneficial to spend the extra time to create these alternate set of listing photo templates that are more aligned with the specific customer and the specific market of each niche or each micro market that you're selling in using the ornaments. So like I said, just a pro tip, you don't need to have multiple sets of listing photos, but it's been really helpful in our experience and a way for us to stand out and just better align with that customer. And so you can pick and choose, if you do have these multiple sets, which one you want to deploy for whatever market or whatever design you come up with for that Christmas ornament. And as a reminder, guys, I just want to say, be a leader, not a follower. Please do not just copy another shop's listing photos. You guys must do your own research, understand your customer, and create something better than what is currently on the market. Our goal is that you begin to develop a skill, like I said at the beginning, so that you guys can be a leader in the market and create best-selling listing photo templates, not only for Christmas ornaments, but any product you guys work on in the future. So another pro tip, if you guys don't feel like your listing photo templates are the absolute best ones on Etsy, you should spend more time on them. If you don't have that feeling that you're so confident that these are the absolute best ones on Etsy, you should spend more time on them. Do not rush them. They should not be completed in just a few hours. So your homework today is to begin your photo template research. And again, remember, your photo templates should not be done in just a few hours. They are your single greatest opportunity to get the click and to win on Etsy.